Welcome back to the Mindful Hunter podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jay Nichol. And what you're about to listen to is the first episode in a new series. So I've teamed up with Pap Van Winkle, and we're going to do a show once a month called Guns and Stuff with Pap Van Winkle and Mindful Hunter, where we're going to primarily focus on rifle hunting. Now, obviously, other gun stuff will come into the mix. Some general hunt stuff will come into the mix. And I'm sure just us, shooting the shit about whatever comes across the table will also jump into the mix. But we're going to do our best to focus on hunting-related gun topics. Now, I've been looking to collab with somebody on reviews and kind of just general technical information for people for a long time, and finding other non-sponsored technical gear nerds in the industry is very challenging. And that's why I really got excited about this particular partnership, because he's one of the only other guys in the industry I know that kind of cuts through the nonsense, gives unbiased, unsponsored feedback, and does really high quality reviews. So this is the kind of first thing that we're bringing to the table, but there's definitely the opportunity and the likelihood of some more content and reviews coming in the near future. I'll dive into this a little bit more in the podcast, but I just kind of wanted to introduce the concept here for you. And if there's things you want to see from us moving forward, please hit either of us up on Instagram. Send me an email at jay@mindfulhunter.com. We would love to hear from you. I want this to really be about delivering value for you guys and answering the questions that you need to get answered. And the last bit of housekeeping that I got a line on some cancellation black bear hunts in British Columbia. There's dates in the very end of April, some dates through May, and then I think there's one spot left the first week of June. These hunts are $4,000 US for the April and May dates, and $5,000 for June. Lodge-based hunt, fly into Prince George. Everything's taken care of for you. I've been up in this area a ton. There's a ton of bears. I wouldn't say it's like the biggest bears in the world, but there's substantial bears. Like, I've seen 7-footers up there. I know people who've killed 7-footers up there. There was a 7-footer taken last year in camp. I know that for sure. There's a lot of 6-footers. It's a great place to go bow hunting. I've taken 3 bears in this kind of general area with my bow and another 2 with rifle. There's a lot of opportunity. It's a great hunt. It's a fun hunt. If you're interested in that, shoot me an email, jay@mindfulhunter.com. We can hop on the phone and chat about it. And if it's going to make sense, I'll put you guys in touch. So also, Mindful Reviews is been growing steadily. So thank you all for your continued support. And if you want to support what I do with unbiased, non-sponsored gear reviews, go to mindful-reviews.com. Join up. We'd love to have you. It's a fantastic community over there. And without further ado, let's jump into the podcast. Guns and Stuff with Pap Van Winkle and Mindful Hunter. We both got beards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. It's that time of year.
It is that exact time of year. Normally I bring mine in a little bit earlier. Like I come more like a fall, so I have it for the winter. Although given how non-winter our fucking winter was this year, I think we're probably actually on time.
Yeah, same here. Winter is not doing well.
No, not at all, man. Like it's been piss and rain here for 2 straight weeks. I've been trying to go do binocular reviews, and I'm like, I don't even know what the fuck I'm supposed to do. I guess I'll do a review in the rain, and just it is what it is, because it's like it literally has not stopped for weeks.
It's a good part of the review, right? Because
it's true.
Once it's raining and snowing, man, that's a deal breaker for like more than half the lasers out there. Like, and that's hunting conditions. I don't know how many times I've gone out, had a laser rangefinder or whatever, and you go out and it's raining or snowing, and you're like, dude, I know that hill's not 37 yards. It's like 400 yards.
Yeah.
And dude, they just shit the bed.
Yeah. Fog is brutal too. And when I do my winter goat hunts, it's just like, it's madness with the fog. And I find that it's like you could shoot through it, but you can't range through it to save your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we've been having is tons of fog. It's freaking crazy. The inversion here this winter, the last couple of weeks has been brutal.
Yeah. People are excited about this, man. I have a shitload of questions. How did you do on your end? Did you get many?
I sent them all to you. I just told them to go to your page.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Just do it that way, just because I figured.
Oh yeah, that's right. You just posted.
You're hosting it, yeah. Because I can't post Q&As.
That's right.
I'm still banned from going live and doing Q&As on Instagram.
That's so crazy, man. My buddy has a bodybuilding podcast kind of network YouTube channel, and I just realized I was looking at my phone before we hopped on here, and he had his whole YouTube channel deleted. And just probably bots picked up steroid talk or something like that. And it's not illegal as long as you're doing it from like you're not advocating use and stuff like that and recommending like recreational drugs. But like he's been working for years, man. I think he was finally up to like 20,000 subscribers or something. And just, that's what they can do, man. They just shut the lights out and you're done.
Yep. And that's what I keep waiting for. I haven't been on there as much just because it's, it takes so much time and energy to like do stuff. And, I'm on there answering questions daily, anyone DMs or whatever. But as far as putting content up, it's a battle every single time I post. And it doesn't even have to be, I don't do sales. I don't advocate for, gun violence or anything like that. But it's just like every single post is flagged, pulled, and then they just add, oh, you got another 30-day ban. And it's because I posted a picture of, the last one was Peterson brass.
Right.
Just said, new brass, time to reload. Bam, 30 days for violation of like U.S. import, export, controlled items. It's like, this is getting out of hand, So
that's a good segue. We're going to leave all this stuff in here. So everybody listening knows what we're going to experiment with is doing this thing once a month. And I think we've had some online conversations about this, and I don't think podcasts get referenced enough as one of like the last frontiers where you can really own communication. Like podcasts never get taken down. They're not targeted for keywords. They might not. And I don't do a lot of organic searching for podcasts. Like I would rarely open my podcast in and type in hunting, and like I would have to like hear of the podcast somewhere. But
right.
What I like about podcasts is, I guess technically you don't own the audience like you would with a newsletter subscription, but I feel it's a far more secure form of engagement with the people who want to listen to you because there's no censorship. They can't shadow ban you. Like if somebody's looking for your podcast, they're going to find it. So what we're going to experiment with is trying to do these once a month. We'll see how the appetite goes. I think given the volume of questions, there's no way we're getting through all these today. I think the format we're going to try, and we're open to feedback from everybody who's listening. Like this is really about trying to deliver some value to you guys. I think we're going to pick a topic or two to open up each segment with, and we'll try and keep them kind of topical. You just got back from SHOT Show, so we're going to dive into a little bit of that at the beginning of the episode. And then I've got a review on Rangefinding binoculars coming out, and I thought it would be good to spend a few minutes on that. Just an overview of like what some of the frustrations have been in that particular product category and what some of the wins and some of the losses and highlights and lowlights have been. And then we'll kind of spend the rest of our time going through a Q&A. But if anybody has any feedback or you want anything, obviously you can DM either one of us. I will try and I'm not sure, maybe you guys can give us some feedback. What works best for you? I could easily create a gun questions at mindfulhunter.com email address, and people could just load that up with questions. Or I could just post an Instagram Q&A, every now and then when we run out of questions. So you guys let me know what you think is going to work best for you. I've always gotten really good response with the Q&As, and they're a really easy way to keep it organized because I open it up and I can just scroll through them and answer them until we're out of questions. So yeah. So we were just commenting on what a non-winter it's been, but How are the holidays? How's the new year? How is everything going?
Good, man. Just family life and all same old, man. Just
Yeah.
plugging away, doing articles and just wrapping up hunting and trapping. I've been just pulled my trap line down and it's just chaos, man. You get done with hunting season and then it's just like, the garage is just my office behind me is disaster. So I've got tons of gear to go through and clean and put away. And I've just been putting it off. And now it's become a serious problem. So that's probably what I'm going to do the next couple months is just reorganize and get to shooting again. I fell behind this summer with all the closures in the forests and places I shoot. So way behind on load development and shooting and all that stuff. So got a lot to get caught up on now that we're having a mild winter. Time to get out and shoot.
Now, what's the trapping season been like? I would assume kind of garbage.
It started off good for me because there was no snow. So it was way easier to get around, way easier to set traps and get all, just get out there. And then all of a sudden we started to get snow and then it snowed. Snowed. So I was frantically trying to pull some stuff that I knew I wasn't going to get back to for a couple months if I didn't get it out now. And then, I'm plowing through bumper deep snow and it was fun, but got everything pulled out. And once it started snowing that much, it just got really difficult for the areas that I trap and the quotas were just too close in some areas for closing. So it was good. It was nice for a couple months, but so this last month we just got a ton of snow like real quick. And then now it's 40 degrees and raining and the roads are crap and it's
Same
just no
here,
good.
man. What kind of species are you targeting where you're at?
Wolf, bobcat, otters, beavers, fox, coyote, this martin. Had a full line out this year, just a little bit of everything.
How does it work in Montana? Do you need any type of license or is it kind of like hunting? If it's public land, you can just go and do whatever you want to do.
You got to have a trapping license to trap,
but not let me rephrase that. You don't need like a tenure or a concession or something like that.
No.
Okay.
It's just get your trapping license, get your certification for wolf. If you want a wolf trap, means you have to take another course. You have to take if you're new to trapping, you have to take like a wolf or a trapping course to get your trapper's license. If you're born before, I think 85 or something, you don't have to if you've been trapping before that. And then if you want to trap wolf, you have to take a wolf one. But as far as the areas go, if it's national forest or public land, you can trap within the regulations. And then if it's on private land, you just have to get permission. And then certain places have we have a lot of timber company land, right? It's like owned by timber companies.
Right.
And so each one of them has their own rules and how many sections you can get and what you can trap and how you can trap it. Some of them are really lax and they just want you out there trapping and they don't care, so it's kind of nice just having the different areas to go to and kind of a pain in the butt because with all the stuff going on with like links and everything, there's like certain areas where you can't trap with certain stuff or you can't use snares or it can get confusing, if you're not really reading the regs and paying attention, you could get yourself in trouble if you're new to it.
Now you're a guy who does a lot and posts a lot about some of the issues that we should be paying more attention to that Howell's kind of involved in and what's going on in Colorado. How do you feel about where Montana is at? I almost feel like trapping is one of the first things they go after because there's less people to support it. It's pretty easy to write an anti-trapping narrative. You show a dog in a snare, something like that. How do you feel about where Montana's sitting in regards to that, especially in relation to like how heavily Colorado is getting hit these days?
Montana's gotten better. Once they started like allowing us to trap wolves, it was pretty restrictive. And then trapping is the management tool for predators. For those guys that don't trap or don't know anybody that traps or thinks that, guys shooting coyotes or guys shooting wolves are managing them, sorely mistaken. Trappers are your best friend. If you hunt ungulates in Canada, Alaska, lower 48, trappers, they're the ones that make it happen, man. Those are the guys hitting wolf quotas in the areas that they can trap. Those are the guys pulling big numbers and making it work for hunters and for ungulates all across North America. So once we lose that trapping, the ability to trap, especially wolves, Guys don't realize how smart wolves are, how hard they are to hunt. And trapping's getting tougher and tougher. They're a smart animal. So in Montana, they've been really, laxing the regulations and making it easier to trap them, increasing the quotas, because they realize the guys that do it, give them more freedom, give them more wolves. It went from 5 wolves to 10. Now in Montana, I think between hunting and trapping, you can kill 20 a year if you're hardcore and after it, which is good because there are guys that do. But the big drawback is the grizzly bears right now. The antis just keep throwing, they'll get a judge to rule in their favor that, the grizzly bears aren't hibernating anymore because of climate change. So, you can't trap wolves until all the grizzly bears, they'll have like 1 or 2 grizzlies that have a collar on it they're monitoring. And they may be, 300 miles from me, but I still can't trap wolves until those grizzlies go into hibernation. Well, man, with the winters we've been having, it just shows how organized they are.
Yeah.
And their goals and their plans. I mean, guys just are taking it too lightly and being too comfortable with the current position of things. And like Hal and a lot of those organizations are doing a great job kind of really bringing this stuff to light on social media. And guys really need to pay attention to everything. You may not trap, but you have, like you said, trapping is a low-hanging fruit. It's the easiest thing to go after. And I remember when they banned it in Arizona in the late 80s, and it was easy to shut down. They put it to a popular vote, and they show pictures of deer and, stuff that's super rare, very low. If you're a horrible trapper and you're just a bad human, you can catch some bad stuff and accidents happen. I've caught incidentals where I didn't mean to catch it. Most of the time you can let them go depending on the trap and whatever else. But, you start taking pictures of that stuff and posting it on social media, which goes into like a whole nother, realm of even just hunting. Just like the stuff you post on social media, it can be used against you later. And if you're a trapper and you post stupid things that are bad images, it might be part of trapping, but you got to think about how the other side's going to view it, because they will use it against us when they come for trapping and for hunting. And so it's very sensitive time right now, because it's a great tool. We need trappers. We need more trappers out there, learning how to do it and putting pressure on wolves and everything else. But with the grizzly bears and now with the Wolverine stuff, I'm super concerned about it, because Wolverines are out year round. Right. And I think that's their next, gateway into shutting down trapping and beyond that, shutting down winter hunting and winter sports, whether you snowmobile or ski or, snowshoe, just like being out in winter. I think they're going to start really pushing this, next narrative of the Wolverine, just to get a full year long, control on trapping and everything else, just because it might disturb or, affect or impact the Wolverines. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that stuff come out, probably starting in Colorado, because I know they've been talking about introducing Wolverines, and, they already tried lynx down there and that failed. And now wolves, it's just going to be an evolving thing that we got to really stay on top of and be active and voiceful on with the politics of it.
Yeah, it's something. I have a couple of things in the works too of newer ways I want to support those guys. I think Howl's one of the most important things that's happened in the last few years, because you kind of underestimate the kind of technological advances on the other side and the way they have, big email lists set up and big automated ways to send letters to, hundreds of, senators, in your case, MPs, in our case, like whatever the political position of choice may be. And I think Howell's done a very good job of kind of leveling that playing field a bit. We're still heavily outnumbered. And I still, I did this project a while ago for this organization called One Campfire, which is kind of like this offshoot, or this, it's sprung out of our Wild Sheep Society of BC. And they're kind of a conservation group aimed at increasing relationships with a group of people I ended up coining the term non-hunting outdoor enthusiasts. So think about your rock climbers, your campers, your through hikers, mountain bikers, all these type of people, because I really believe a major way forward for us is building relationships with people like that, because we both have the same common interest in protecting, wild places. And I think they understand us more. It's more easy for them to understand our motivations than it is for, Sally housewife at home in Victoria or Bozeman or some other, more metropolitan area. And I think, we're a very small percentage of the population, and we're never going to outvote people who don't hunt. But if we can bridge that gap with people who don't hunt, but also don't have an active bias against hunting, they're kind of fence sitters. They're like, I don't know. If we can turn those I don't knows to like, hey, I know a hunter and he's actually a pretty good dude. I'm sure if he's doing stuff out there, it's happening in a responsible manner. They're making the right choices. A lot of that money goes to conservation. I think that's another area where we need to spend a lot of time, because we do need, allies moving forward. And we're never going to get, the diehards and who are those, like the animal rights people and the people. Like, I'm just not even going to waste my time. But I do think there's a bunch of folks in the middle that don't have an active distaste of hunting, that, like I try and give as much sausage to like dudes at the gym and just random people like, hey, I hunt. You want to try some of this? Because it's like, I know you're not turning huge numbers, but like you just went from like, a guy that just hunts to like a guy that just hunts is like not a bad guy and is like cool to hang out with. And I think that in the long game, that kind of stuff is going to prove to be very important.
Oh yeah. I mean, we're never going to turn Washington, DC, or, people from Florida or California, big metropolis. You're never going to turn them. You're never going to, they have no idea what hunting is except what they see on social media, or what they see, what the narrative is painted for them by the opposing groups. So it's all the people in between, which, they may be the majority in a lot of the voting, politically, but there's a lot of people in between that, like I said, their brother-in-law hunts, or he's a big hunter, or a fisherman that, like I guide fly fishing trips in the summer, and I give like 50% of my snack sticks and my summer sausage. That's my treat for my clients, right? That's what we eat for lunch, like cheese and crackers and all that stuff. And they love it. They're just like, holy cow, this is elk, this is deer, And most of them don't hunt. They're tourists coming to see Glacier National Park. They want to go fly fishing, do the Montana experience, right? And they ask a lot of questions about hunting. And that's just like a foot in the door for me. It's just like, oh yeah, here, let me tell you about hunting and what it does. And they're like, oh wow, that's awesome. I didn't know that. So you just extrapolate that. How many people are like that out there in the outdoors that rock climb, hike, fish, go to all the national parks in the lower 48 and Canada, that, they're not against hunting, but if it came to like deciding, they'd really be like, I don't know. And the other side's really good at tugging on emotional heartstrings. People are emotional voters more than anything these days, and not against, not the educational side. It's all about emotion, not against science. It's just, well, I feel good about this, so I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do, because I care about animals. Well, we care about animals too. And honestly, once hunters leave the landscape, who's going to foot the bill for conservation? The states aren't. Other people that live in cities, they don't realize, like, we pay to play. We care more about that stuff and put more money into it than anybody else combined. And so you gotta get those other people, like you said, the I don't knows, you got to convince them.
Yep. I think they're the lowest hanging fruit. Okay. So let's transition on to SHOT Show. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. I'd also be interested in your opinion on where you think shows in general are heading. Like, are we still just in a little bit of a post-COVID slump, or do you think, because I heard ATA this year was a ghost town. Do you think that some of the bigger guys realized during COVID they didn't need the shows as much as they used to now with the power of social media and stuff? Like, do you think shows are slipping as far as how important they are to the industry in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of, like, especially SHOT, right? That one, for example, is the biggest one, largest in the world. Yeah, post-COVID, a lot of companies realized after 2020, or 2021, really, because SHOT was before the pandemic.
Oh, it just
right? I was there, yeah. I was there 2020, and we were talking about it. Everyone's joking about this COVID.
Yeah, the plane had just landed. Some people had gotten off. Everybody's
people had just gotten off. What's going on? And we all left like, yeah, whatever. And 2021 is what, when it really started with, like, the closures and all that stuff. And a lot of companies didn't go. And a lot of companies were like, holy cow, like, people don't realize, like, these big companies, they spend millions. Like, it's a lot of money to go to SHOT Show and have a big booth for, Swarovski, Zeiss, Ruger, Winchester, Browning. These booths people haven't been. They're huge. And there's the manpower. The hotel rooms are $1,000 a night. You know, you got to feed your whole crew. These companies spend a lot of money. And after they didn't go for a year for the first time ever, they pocketed, you know, $2 million that they didn't, you know, shovel out, had their record year in sales, you know, because it's just like a big trend up in hunting gear and equipment. And they're like, whoa, that's pretty awesome. Well, we're not going to go back next year. And then they bankroll the same money again, put it into some other marketing tools, and bam, they did well again. You know, they're not losing money. The old SHOT Show, what people don't realize is that's where what the show was created for was like all the dealers. If you're a gun dealer,
that's the other thing for SHOT Show people need to know. That's like a trade show in the truest sense. Like, it's not open to the retail public. You need to have some affiliation with a manufacturer of some kind to even get a badge to go in there. Like, it's meant to do for people to do business, like brands to do business with other brands.
Yep, exactly. And so if you're not a media guy, or, you know, which again, that's another clouded thing, because now the show is just full of influencer type people walking around videoing themselves, walking around SHOT Show and touching guns. And it's turned into a way it's like content generation.
Sure.
And so it's super crowded this year from years past. It was really crowded with just a whole lot of that stuff. But yeah, the show was created so people could go there and actually place orders for the year. Right. Like, hey, I want 50,000 of this unit, 10,000 of this unit, or 100 or 50, whatever it is. And they'd place their orders back when it was paper, you know, and it now is those guys are placing orders online. You don't need to go and hand them a paper order anymore or see the product. It's all the product releases on social media probably do just as well, whether they launch it at SHOT or not at SHOT. You know, they still get.
Well, this is one of the reasons I think ATA took such a big hit. The bow releases aren't even lined up with the trade shows anymore. And it's like, if you're not going to see like the big bows from like the big 5 or 6 guys, like really, like when you lose that draw, I think looking at a new release or a new vein, like some of it is cool, but it's not the same thing as when they used to all be lined up to release specifically for that show.
And I think that's a lot to do. I'm not a bow hunt. I shot a bow my whole life. I'm not like an archery, you know, guy. But I think what it is, just from talking to buddies that are in that side of the things a lot more, is ATA just hasn't really done a good job of, like, you know, doing it, keeping the show going, really putting it out there. It's always on the East Coast in the winter. And you know, it's like, man, I think they would do way better if they came out West. Yeah. So people could travel and get away and warm up. I mean, that's why all the, you know, other shows, I think, from the rifle gun side of the hunting industry do so well and are always growing, or at least, you know, not dwindling. Right. I think it's because people want to come to Vegas. People want to go to, you know, Salt Lake City. People want to go to all these other places and check out these shows. It's kind of like a vacation to get away from the Midwest, you know, winters and, you know, slump. But honestly, I think the ATA should just join forces with like SHOT. Right. And just put one. There's actually quite a bit of archery stuff. They had like an archery section at SHOT this year. We walked through. That's
interesting.
You know, Spot Hog and a bunch of arrow manufacturers. I passed through it and just ran into some buddies, but I didn't really look around at everything. There's a lot more stuff there that I didn't really know of. But it was a pretty sizable, you know, section of new flooring that they haven't had open up in the past. And man, that would just be a huge generator for the industry in general. Just kind of join forces, because then you'd have everything. You could literally go to SHOT and see everything: archery, packs, rifles, optics, ammo. It would all be under one house. And from like the hunting side of things, that would be ideal, because most shops aren't just like gun or bow, although there are some, but a lot of larger shops are a little bit of everything. Yep. Everybody's a multi-weapon hunter anymore. There's very few guys that are, you know, I only hunt with a muzzle loader, or, you know, yeah, there's still diehard rifle and diehard archery, but most guys are just whatever opportunity they can, because it's so limited nowadays. They're doing both. But yeah, so SHOT's a mess. It's one of those things that you go to, but when you get there, you're just like, I'm so over this. I'm ready to go home. Like, I'm not big on travel. I don't like Vegas. It's not my cup of tea. I go there, meet the guys I need to meet, and get out. It's cool to go to one time and experience it, right? Yeah. But then I've been going for over 10 years, 15 years, something like that. So it's kind of lost its luster for me. But it is fun to go back and meet new people and see all your buddies and have dinner and bullshit. But yeah, it's crazy. It's a giant show. It takes forever to go through it You could spend all 4 days and not see everything. It's
That's
that big.
crazy. Yeah, I had some buddies say the exact same thing about Sheep Show this year. They'd never gone, the big one in Reno. They're like, listen, it's great and everything, but that's like a one and done for me. Like we're getting all kind of a little bit older, staying up late nights, do you know what I mean? And then getting up early in the morning. There was just like, yeah, it was cool and all, but not going to be an annual thing for me. So I do feel like some of the bigger shows are like that. Like I'd love to go to the Big Sheep Show one year. Like it's a pretty, seminal event in the hunting industry. And I'd love to get that. You'd meet some dudes there that you're never going to meet anywhere else. I think that would be super cool. So what were some of your highlights or takeaways from the show? Is anything like really cool, grab your eye?
It was like this, and it's been all over social media and everyone's talking about it, but it was like the year of lever guns. Everybody was releasing a lever gun, and I like lever guns. I'm not as much on the tactical side of them. They are what they are, but like there's lever guns everywhere. I mean, there was AR manufacturers. I think Aero Precision released a lever gun.
Now, is this just like a hipster thing? I think it's just like a nostalgia. It's cool. It's kind of old school.
Well,
or is there like an actual argument for some type of superiority for that particular mode?
I think it's just different. I mean, lever guns have always been cool. Everyone loves lever guns.
Yeah, they're
I think
badass.
when a lot of states started taking away semi-autos, I think a lot of guys were like, well, I can do a lot of damage with I don't know who started it with the lever gun, or the tactical lever gun. I don't know where that trend started, but It really took off. And now everyone's offering like black, lever guns where they're like tricked out crazy aluminum, stuff, and big lever loops and smooth actions and, tactical forends with M-lock and threaded barrels for suppressors. And so it's really taken off and resurgence, which is cool. I mean, the more guns we sell, the more money down here in the lower 48, the more money goes into Pittman Robertson, which goes back into conservation. So by all means, like make all the guns you want and pump them out there for whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But a lot of lever guns, like tons. There was everywhere. There's some cool optics, some different stuff. I was really impressed with some of the glass from, I should have put my notes down. I left my notes upstairs, but, oh my God, drawing a huge blank. I'll come back to it. But, a lot of optics, stuff in like the low, mid, high end. There's quite a bit of movement along through there of just different products, some like lower end, laser rangefinders, from just like I said, just a variety of companies, some that aren't as well known. So a lot of movement there, a lot of guns, a lot of bolt guns and stuff. That was another trend. It was just like everyone's making a bolt gun. There was Stag Arms had a bolt gun. Aero Precision released some other new bolt guns that are pretty cool, some lightweight hunting stuff. So, I mean, everyone's just kind of taking over all sides of the market and, just developing all kinds of different products to sell to people. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they're there for, and sell you a new stuff. You might not need it, but we're going to make something else and, promote the hell out of it.
Have you ever looked through any German precision optics?
So that was another one that I hadn't really looked through them a bunch, and then saw the booth, walked in and talked to the owner, Mike, and got the rundown on all their stuff. And I was pretty impressed with, some of the stuff they had, like in that middle price point stuff, that $500 to $600. Man, they really listened to the market and had some really interesting like turret designs and optical, varieties. And the glass was pretty good, like edge to edge clarity. I mean, it's hard to tell inside.
Yeah.
In the lighting there, you can't really get a good one. But when you compare everything in that lighting, from, all kinds of small, cheap knockoff brands all the way up to like Swarovski, and Swarovski was the biggest one there. I mean, I don't think Zeiss didn't have a booth. Leica didn't have a booth, which is kind of weird for those bigger companies. But yeah, you can kind of compare everything, in the same lighting, and it was good stuff. I was impressed by some of the stuff, especially for the price point. I mean, for $600, their new, I can't think of the name of it right now, but their new one, it's in their $600 range. If you go on German Precision Optics, you'll see it. It was pretty sweet little scope for what it was.
Yeah, I was at my bow shop just across the border in the States. I want to say 5 weeks ago, when I was picking up my Prime. And I saw this like rangefinder and pair of binoculars kind of on display on this little thing. And I was like, what the German Precision Optics? I'm like, I never heard of this. And the dude working the counter is like, in love with them, and I took them outside, and like the construction quality felt really nice. The rangefinder, looked really nice, and it was like I almost think there's more room for competition in that mid range. Like I think the big three kind of have that like hyper alpha market locked down. I mean, the NLs were a pretty significant advancement. I think we're going to see some significant ranging advancement, but I kind of feel that like from a binocular perspective and a spotting scope perspective, we're kind of topped out. But I think in that middle of the road market, there's a lot of room for advancement because, and I'm kind of getting bored of just shitting all over them, but Vortex has had a lot of that market tied up for a long time. And I think there's a lot of room to beat them at that game, that mid-range game, because they have gigantic marketing budgets and all the rest of it. And some of these smaller guys, like I've been a big fan of Tract for the last year or two. Direct to consumer, they use shot HT glass. Now they don't have the same coatings as some of like the Zeiss Victories and whatnot, but they have the shot HT glass. They're coming in at a very comparable price point to like a Vortex or a Maven. And in my opinion, they're a superior optic. So where I used to say, listen, just save up the money for the Alpha, now I'm kind of transitioning more to, listen, if you're set on the mid-range, let's at least have a conversation, because there's a right way to go in the mid-range and a wrong way to go. Like you're leaving money on the table if you go with some of these brands where I think you can get, a 7 to 10% increase in quality for the same price for some of these other smaller, kind of newer upstart brands.
Oh, totally. And I'm right there with you. It's, Vortex has been doing their thing, and they are what they are. The product is what it is.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people, like, I'm sure you get as much as I do. They're like, I don't want to use that brand. Like, I don't want anything to do with it. What else is there in this price point? And that's where that German precision optics to me. And so one thing that's confusing to people, well, I think will be confusing to people, is the German precision optics. So it's not like Zeiss or Swarovski, right, in the sense that it's a Germany-based company that's using Germany, or Austria, that's where the big ones are, Austria, Germany, whatever. It's still a conglomerate of, overseas imported Asian parts that make up the scope designed from the guys over in Germany. They get those components, it's assembled, and then QC'd in Germany is the way it was described to me. So instead of the product being made, QC'd and everything in China or Japan, where you're going to have like a very loose QC and you're going to have a lot of lemons, which is kind of the issue with some of those brands that are running that system. One guy will get a scope, it's the greatest thing ever. Five guys will get scopes and the turtle fall off in the first, 2 days of use. Well, it's got a great warranty. Yeah, but still, like, that's crap. So the nice thing about the German precision optics is, like I said, it's QC'd in Germany by the guys that are kind of going over everything, making sure, because they do have a really good warranty satisfaction type stuff. Whereas if it doesn't work or you don't like it, they'll warranty it. They can't fix it. They'll send you a new piece, right?
Yep.
So we did talk about the warranty, which, it's not like this, touted Vortex thing where it's just like, whatever you do, you run it over with a truck or light it on fire, we'll replace it. It's not like that. But if you do have an issue, the company is there to support you and work with you and get it there. And they have parts and components here in the US to kind of, work on that stuff. So you're not relying on the overseas, shipping stuff back and getting it done. So I thought that was super interesting, because in that price point, there's nothing quite like it.
Yeah.
That kind of has that warranty and, has a QC process.
That's interesting.
That's not in China or Japan, where a lot of those issues come about. So I'll be doing some reviews on some of their products, and maybe we can talk about some more stuff later on and get some products to you as well. And we can tag team some different stuff from them, because they do have a full line of rifle scopes, rangefinding binos, and, other stuff. So there's a lot of product there to look at.
Definitely. That's what people need more from us these days too. Like, everybody knows, like, listen, if you got $4,000, just go buy the SWOR or buy the Zeiss. It's these guys in the middle where I think you can really help out with their buying decisions. Something else I've stumbled onto, it was funny. I'm putting together this rangefinding bino review, and one of the categories I do is origin of manufacture. And I was having a thought the other day. that I've looked at so many optics now and compared the origins of manufacture with so many of these optics. I think if you could only tell me one thing and I had to make a buying decision, I think I would ask you where it was built, because it is so unbelievably reliable. Now it's to the point where, like, I can tell you that Myanmar is slightly better than China, and like the different Asian countries even have a different like quality reliability rating in, like, it's not just it's all overseas. Like, there's a very reliable, like, Japan is significantly better than China. Like, this was one of the things that happened with Vortex. Their Razor lineup, the binos, used to be made in Japan. I got some of those early Razor binos. They were good binos. The later ones started being made in China, and the reliability went to crap. And now Vortex has gone so far, they won't actually tell you which facility any individual product is made in, because from a logistics perspective, they don't know. Like, they're making various parts at various facilities, having them manufactured and assembled. And I really think that was one of the nails in the coffin for me, because I saw everything take like one more kind of shift down, because now, not like, at least when it was made in China, I knew that it was made in China, or I knew it was made in Myanmar, or whatever it might have been made. But the fact that they won't even tell you where something is made in it, I forget. I copy and pasted this statement that they sent me, but it's some gobbledygook about all of our products, and manufacturing takes place in a variety of countries, and I was just like, that's kind of wild to me that you can't even nail down. But yeah, the big takeaway from me was like, and you kind of have Europe against the rest of the world as far as quality goes, but where something is built, still to this day, as much as everybody touts globalization, where something is built, I think is probably the single biggest determinant in quality. I love this idea of in-house QC though. Like, I think that's a way to take advantage of the cost savings without introducing the unreliability that we've had to deal with from some of these other brands.
Oh, totally. And, when you start having companies that are that big, like Vortex and others, where the stuff's made overseas, and then you start having all these different components, what people don't realize is just like how precise optical devices are in order to make them work and make them last. When you got parts being made here, there, here, there, here, there, here, there, and then like they're assembled here or put together here, man, you just lost so much control. And if there's not a final QC in the US by a reputable source, or even overseas by a reputable source, I would question the longevity of that product or quality of that product. And like Gunworks, I know in their Revic line, or Gunworks, Revic, separate, but owned by the same. I know a lot of their optics, their whole QC is in the US, in Cody, Wyoming. So they get all their stuff made from overseas, comes in, then they do their QC and actually install all their software. At least that was explained to me. So they have like a really, a tighter QC, because they have the final say. Like, they install all that stuff. They don't trust that stuff going overseas, all their software for their, ballistics. They install that. They, QC all those parts. And they do have a new rifle scope that's released at SHOT. And I was impressed by the glass in it. It was actually a really, really nice looking optic. It's got some, obviously some tech in it with, a digital readout of the distance and dope inside it, which is pretty cool. But it was a nice product. I like that as well. That's another part. And then the optics company I forgot of was Steiner. Okay. Steiner, the HX, I believe HX6 was the rifle scope I was looking through.
Steiner's old school, no?
Super old school.
Yeah.
But I really liked it. Like, it's one of those, when you go, I went in, I didn't know anybody. And I went in there, started looking at products and started talking to the guys. And next thing you know, I'm talking with one of the engineers that developed one of the product lines that we were looking at. And that's what I love about German optics and just across the board. Those guys, like, optics are their life.
Yeah.
I know guys at Swarovski, like I said, Zeiss, all those companies. When you talk to those engineers, it is their life. I mean, that's why those guys are top tiers, because those guys don't play golf. They don't, watch sports. They go, they design, develop optics. That's what they do. I mean, that's their life. And when you talk to them about it, you can tell, like, those guys are passionate, and that's why they're always going to be the bar, just because that's all they think of. That's all they do. And the Steiner line, I was really impressed with. It's the first time I've really spent a lot of time looking at the product. They've always been kind of heavy, always been a little bit higher on the military side for the European countries. But They came out with some like 26, I think 27, 28 ounce, optics with really good turrets. Probably one of the nicest turrets I've ever seen on a rifle scope for like positivity and like the clicks. And like, it was squared away. Super impressed. The glass edge to edge clarity was really, really nice. And I think there's going to be some really big movement for them if they start to get a little bit more of that US hunting market in developing those products. Because like I said, some of their glass was very impressive for what it was in that price point. And it's that lower, sub 2000, stuff. It's not $3,000-$4,000 rifle scopes. And then their optics in that 500 to 1,000 or 1,500 range, and their binoculars and rifle scopes was another option for people that don't want to go with, the imported stuff from the other companies. It was some good stuff. I want to do more. I'll do more product reviews from them on those rifle scopes and their binos. And they got Rangefinding bino that was really nice for the price point. I can't remember the name of it, but I said we'll talk and get some more of that stuff coming up, because I think it was all new stuff they were just releasing.
I think that's going to be my goal for 24. Like, I do find it every time I'm doing an optics, it's always like 3 or 4 of the same guys, and then I mix in 1 or 2 new ones. And I think once you do so many, it's like, listen, except for like an odd, weird anomaly, these guys all kind of stand in relation to each other across their similar product lines in the same way. Like, I can tell you that the spotting scopes from Swaro, Maven, Zeiss, and Vortex are going to kind of line up the same way as their top end binos are going to line up the same way as their top end rifle scopes. And I think looking at it, and it's not as immediately popular because people know the big guys and they want to see the big guys, but I think it's actually more valuable to people to start looking at some of these other options.
And like you were talking about with your laser rangefinder, when we get into that stuff later, your review there, there's a big push right now, and everyone wants like laser rangefinders with all the ballistic solvers in there, like the new Leicas with AB in there and all that stuff. And this gets expensive. It gets very expensive, and it's just like, do you really need it? Yeah. Like we talked about earlier, is just, do you really need it, or do you really just need a basic laser rangefinder? Because what I shot this year was there's a lot of guys, or there's a lot of optics in that lower price point that just have a laser rangefinder that tells you, how far something is, but it's got a good laser and it's a good optical system. Doesn't have all that stuff, so the price doesn't start getting strung out. Yeah. And getting higher and higher and higher because they got a ballistic solver that they had to buy and software from somebody else and have it installed, and all that stuff takes up room, takes up time, takes up costs. So there's some, like you said, you'll cover it in your reviews and stuff, but do you really even need all this stuff? I mean, how much are you really going to use it, and what's your budget? Because there's a lot of options.
I actually think that's where more of the value of this range-finding binocular review is going to come from, because I was quite unsure about it myself, and I can really see now there's like, if we want to be really coarse with it, 2 broad categories of range-finding binoculars. You have your kind of like basic angle compensation with maybe some type of like load profiles, that you can scroll through, and maybe you can add your own customizable, but there's no environmental variables, none of your high-end stuff like aerodynamic jump or spin drift or any of this kind of stuff. But when I actually was looking at this, it's like, I not only do I not have a desire to shoot anything over 500-600, I don't have the ability. I know that. Like, I haven't practiced enough at those distances. I don't know my rifle and my ammunition well enough to shoot at those distances. And as soon as you say to yourself, like, listen, I'm never shooting anything over 500 or 600, you just put yourself in that angle compensated category. Like, you almost have no need for any of that other high-end stuff. And once you do that, you can take all that money and now spend it on the actual optics in there, because that's the problem with these range-finding binos. Once you pair the alpha glass with the alpha software, like, dude, like, it's one of the most expensive products you're probably, except for maybe like a custom rifle or a giant spotter, it's probably the most expensive thing that's going to be in your gear room.
Oh, hands down. And it's like, you field as many questions as I do on it. It's just kind of like, hey, what should I get? I really want to get this, but I really want to get, what between these 2 brands, or I really want, what XYZ, whatever it is in terms of glass with, lasers. The one thing you got to really decide is, the primary focus of a binocular is to, find game. right?
Right.
To locate game. Your best glass, like your NL Pures, what I think is the best on the market. And I didn't think the ELs could be improved upon, and then Swarovski improved upon with the NLs. And it's just amazing glass. It's amazing glass because the coatings they can use. As soon as you add a laser, coatings have to change. Everything changes, the clarity, color, definition, everything changes, right? So there's a trade-off. And so if you're really going to be glassing a lot, you've got to have, I think, a dedicated just glass, the best glass you can buy. Don't worry about the lasers, because 9 times out of 10, there's a handheld rangefinder that'll suit your needs for your hunt, whatever it is, and have all those solvers and have all that stuff in there, but will allow you to have the best glass. So it really depends on, like I said, like we talked about, there's just so many options out there. It really depends on what you're really going to hunt. There's the guys say, well, I want to hunt everything. Well, okay, well, you just complicated things for yourself. But what do you hunt every day, day in, day out? What's your, how much are you glassing? How far? What's the light like? There's just so many factors in availability for the optics side of things. And everyone's big and heavy on the lasers, but what they don't understand is, like, once you put that laser in there, the image quality and everything else suffers. So, and the price goes up a whole lot. Like, you can almost go on some hunts for the difference between like really good glass versus the high end echelon stuff of glass with lasers and like the new Leicas. I will say this on the Leicas. I've never been a fan of their products in the longevity side. They seem to always have some issues that are more frequent than other brands. And this has been an ongoing thing with them. I really hope their new product has sealed up that stuff with the GeoVid, with the laser.
Right.
But when we're talking about long range shooting and stuff with that AV software they put in there, there's actually a shot probability feature in their ballistics where you can select your shooter ability. And of course, everyone's going to mark advanced, right?
Yeah,
badass,
of course.
right? But if you're honest and you put, beginner, intermediate, or novice, or whatever it is, and then based on like the distance to the shot, the atmospherics, your cartridge, it tells you a shot probability for a cold bore impact and gives you like a percentage, like 80% chance. So are you good with an 80% chance of killing that deer at one shot at 652 yards, or having a 20% chance you blow its leg off, skip one through its neck, hit it in the guts because the wind or whatever else it is? So I don't know. I thought that was a really cool feature. That's just kind of a little check in there where you start ranging beyond 1,000 yards. That shot probability drops dramatically. Where everyone's like, well, I shot a steel plate last week at my home range, 6 out of 6 times at 1,100 yards, so I'm good. Well, now you're on the side of the mountain. It's 30 degrees cooler. There's 4 different wind values between you and the target that you don't know, and it gives you a 50% shot probability. Well, that you probably shouldn't take that shot if it's 50-50.
No, it's a good gut check. And I was thinking, being a guy with kids, what a cool tool to take out, because it's like you don't even need to tell them. You know what I mean? You could be like range and stuff, and it comes back with like something sub 75. It's like, well, we're gonna keep moving here. Let's see if we can get ourselves a little bit closer. Or that's pretty intriguing. I do feel like we're at a bit of a renaissance in, like the Sig Kilo 3000s didn't come out that long ago. And at the time they were like the best range-finding bino available. Now they're discontinued, and I'm actually have them in here anyways because a buddy lent me his. But if I look at what that can do compared to what like the Revit can do, and I'm looking at like a 5-year gap, like it's not even that significant of a time period that has passed. Like the onboard solvers and the onboard environmental monitoring devices, it's really impressive, the development that has gone on. It, like, if you are a guy, like I always think of competition shooters, like to me, that's almost like, because you're like you said, your primary goal, and I realize there's 2 different leagues and one of them actually has you looking for stuff. So I don't want to completely write off the importance of being able to find stuff. But when I think of those guys, I think of how, because I know they're under time crunches and stuff too, and having all the solvers on board now and having all the data, your profiles loaded right into the binoculars, not even needing to go into the app, having all those environmental variables accounted for in the binos, like it really does seem like we've seen a big jump in the technology and the manufacturing. Like I feel like the industry's put a significant amount of energy into that area the last 5 years.
Oh yeah. And one thing when you talk about optics, the import stuff, right? And, coming over from China, what guys need to realize is there's only so many of those shops making glass. Cause if you start looking at all the optics, you kind of see like
little incestual,
kind of looks like that. Well, it's because it's like, and I've heard this and I've never gone to, China and developed an optic, right? But I've talked to a lot of guys that work in the industry and know it, right? And they say it's kind of like a menu, and you just kind of, I want this and I want this, and
right.
You select it. So they're all the same. Like everything's kind of the same. So there's not really a whole lot of, development and involvement, because there's just like a click and how can we keep these products cheap? And so you kind of see on the lower end of things, you don't really see a whole lot of the improvements in like glass or, lasers as much as you do the software, right? And that software is usually developed here in the States by those individual companies, or some of it may be developed over there. I know like Austria, they develop their own, and that's very specific to them, and they don't like handing things off, right?
Is Revix their own? Because I know AP Revix is like or AB is like the big one that you see. Like it's in SIG, it's in Leica now, it's in Vortex. So I'm assuming Revix is their own in-house.
That's their own. So that's why, like, when they get their optics made, the software itself is not put in. I'm assuming it's a chip or some type of, I'm not an electronic guy, but from what I've been told, it's a chip software that they install once it comes to them in, Cooley, Wyoming, and then they go through the QC and they have that control, right? Which I think is really good for them. And I think why their lasers and their solvers, it work really well. Guys kind of beat up on the glass on the new BR, 10s and say, the glass kind of sucks or whatever, okay. It's not the greatest. My pair I got, I don't know. Like I usually don't get like the cherries. I seem to always kind of fall into that, average group. I wasn't super disappointed in the Revic, BR10, rangefinding binos. The glass, I hunted with them all this year exclusively. Like I have my 1556s, but I didn't find a time where I'm like, wow, this glass sucks. I'm really at a disadvantage, right? I was trying to really be open-minded about it because I've hunted with Swarovski for the last 20 years, and used it because it's the benchmark, right? But I wanted to try it and really see like how much, I was going to really not like it. And I didn't have anything really horrible to say. Yeah, it's not Swarovski. It's not. You can't compare them. You can't say it's not EL. Well, of course it's not EL glass. It's totally different.
It's also a totally different price point.
Totally different price point.
Like almost half.
Exactly.
Exactly. Like you get two of these for one of those. Like I wasn't impressed. I've already, shared on a podcast. I wasn't a big fan, but I need to put that in context. I'd also just went from reviewing a pair of Zeiss, the SFLs. Yeah. And I was on an archery hunt on this particular hunt. And so going from the lightness and the brightness of the SFL to the heaviness on an archery, those shouldn't have been taken on an archery hunt in the first place. However, we only have limited opportunities to test something. I had a brand new pair of binoculars. I wanted to test them out in the field. And it was also an extraordinarily windy hunt, and I was doing everything offhand. And I think this thing that stuck out to me the most was kind of the brightness, and I wasn't super impressed with the focusing ability. Like I kept find myself going past and coming back that focus point. Like Zeiss to me almost has the best, like when I hit focus on a Zeiss, like it's bam. I have no doubt everything is crisp and clear and I'm in focus. And I just had a really hard time kind of dialing that in with those. But again, you got to put it into context. Like if somebody was only ever going to own one pair of binos and they were like a 50-50 archery rifle guy, I'd be like, these are not the binos for you. But if you either had a couple pairs of binos or you were a dedicated long range rifle guy, I mean, there's pretty clear consensus that they probably have the most advanced onboard solver currently available. Like it is a very powerful pair of binoculars in that regard.
And usage. It's really simple to Bluetooth with your phone and get them set up and work. And I would agree. Like Zeiss has always been one of those ones where when it's focused, it's there and,
Yep.
it's easy. And I would agree. Like that's one thing I noticed on the Revix is just, it's a little bit more work to get that crisp. And then once you kind of get it, if you got gloves on or something, it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's not like the Zeisses or like the Swarovskis in terms of that crispness. When you roll that knob, it's bam, there it is. And it's perfect. But again, it goes back to the price point. The guys are always trying to compare the two. And it's just like $2,000 versus, $3,500 or, whatever it is. It doesn't exist yet. On the topic
and most people don't know the SF in Zeiss SF stands for smart focus. And so I've always wondered, because coming from a photography background, like aperture is what defines your depth of field. And in optics, we do inherently want something with a shallow depth of field because it enables us to put our focus on a smaller area. However, when that depth of field gets too small, that's when you find yourself going back and forth across the point of interest because you can't quite tell when it's locked in. And I think Zeiss has got some part of their technology where they have that aperture, or they have the ability to define that area under focus as being a little bit wider. So it's just a little bit more intuitive and it snaps in a little bit nicer than the other guys.
And I don't know if this is why, but I would guess they are huge in the microscopes,
right?
And the focusing, so I'm guessing they've got a lot of time and a lot of money. Because you got to, another thing that a lot of people don't realize is like Zeiss makes probably, again, this is just a rough number, I would guess 80% of their money off of microscopes.
Right.
Sport optics, hunting, birding is probably like 20%. So when they have a lot of money in that microscope world, it kind of transitions over. Same thing with Swarovski. They make 80% of their money off of Swarovski crystal, crystal vases and whatever else. And then you come to the optics side of their house, it's like 80% birding, 20%, hunting and sport optics. So again, those markets pull where that technology goes and where they spend their time and money. And that's why they have, the spotting scopes and optics they do. On that topic, did you see their new binocular released by Swarovski?
No.
So they released an optic. It probably won't make a big splash in the hunting world. It's totally geared towards birding. But when we talk about technology and growth and like just new stuff, they've got a binocular out that has like a function wheel, like your dial for, focusing. There's also inside that, there's a bunch of different options for functions inside the binoculars. It's big. It's definitely a bigger, bulkier optic, but you can record through the binocular. You can, and so there's a bunch of different features. I didn't go through them all. I was blown away by two of the features. I was just so enamored with. I didn't even hear what my buddy was, showing me about all the stuff. So one of them was a lock feature. I could be glassing with optic, look at something, and you press this button once you're in that function or that mode, and it locks that image that you were looking at. So if I'm looking at a deer at 350 yards on this ridge, I push that button, it locks it. I hand you, and I'm like, Jay, the buck's right here. Look through these binos, right? You can't find the buck. You don't know where it is. Right? And I'm like, dude, it's right there. What do you mean you can't see it, Jay? Like, open up your eyes. I hand you the binos after I spot lock it or whatever the function's called. It gives you arrows inside telling you which direction to look. And the arrows are like longer when you're further out.
Like hotter and colder.
Yeah, hot, cold. And then when you get close, an arrow pops up at the top, pointing straight down.
What?
Now you're on that. Dude, genius, right? But
see, I've been waiting for the bino or the optic that will pop a point on my Onyx. Because that's like, I'm always trying to like point stuff out. And I'm like, why can't I look at this goat on this hill, touch a button on my spotting scope, and it drops a pin on my Onyx?
We talked about that, and I think that's Gen 2. Like, I think that's the next thing, because if they've got that technology, there's no reason.
There's no reason. Like, that's
you can't get it to
no. You're just going to overlay that data onto some type of geo-referenced grid, and it's the same info.
Yep,
that's crazy, man.
And then there's another one. Remind me on that topic. There's a laser. I think it was Leupold's newest one. It pin drops and syncs with those apps.
Okay.
I haven't got one yet. I'm getting one. I'm sure a bunch of guys are going to be doing reviews on them, but I'm super interested in that function for just that. Like, oh, it's 1,040 yards, but I needed to drop a pin there. And then also my biggest concern is like, what's the accuracy? Because there's other companies that have, I think Leica has it, and some other ones. And dude, it was plus or minus like 200 yards.
Yeah, that's no good.
Dude, that's no good. If I'm trying to find a down deer at 700 yards and I'm within plus or minus 200, once I get in the dark timber.
That could be across a canyon.
Like, oh, dude, you're not even in the ballpark.
No.
But the other feature on that Swarovski that was just amazing, again, for hunters, probably not useful, right? Guys aren't going to see it, but just as an idea where they're driving the technology and Swarovski creating their own software is you could look at a bird, right? They had bird images on the walls in their little booth, right? Like a duck and a hummingbird. You look at the bird through the optics, set it on identification function, push the button, it identifies the bird for you.
That's
through
crazy.
The binocular. 9,000 species of like birds and mammals. And it means, so obviously you have to be a certain distance, right, for it to work. It's not going to identify a caribou at, 1,000 yards, but within reason, it was pretty impressive. So just
having that technology too, like
technology is there.
Obviously we know a mule deer is a mule deer. Although if huskies were in there, that would have saved some drama in your state last year.
Right. Yeah, totally. Would have saved a lot of problems. But so just cool topics. I mean, or topics. Just some technology and optics that's coming out. Like, dude, that's cool. Like the spot lock feature, that and a hunting laser rangefinding binocular, to where I can identify something, spot lock it, hand it over, and then the other guy gets on it instead of sitting there going, all right, do you see the dead tree on the top of the ridge? Come down 4 of those dead trees height wise and then come over. You're trying to like talk a guy in on it. And the more you do it, you can get pretty savvy. But if the guy who's, you're trying to spot in isn't as, tuned into it, man, you could be there for days and never get him on the deer. So a feature like that in a binocular, that's awesome. And I'm sure that technology is not far from coming over into a legitimate hunting optic. I wouldn't be surprised if, down the road, the new next version of EL ranges, adds that feature. I know I'm going to be advocating for them to do that because I think that's more functional than some of the other stuff that people are putting in, lasers.
Yeah. Okay. Let's, we already lost an hour. Time flies, bro. Let's jump over. How are you doing for time?
I'm good, dude. I'm in no time rush. So whatever it is.
Thoughts on the smaller is better 6mm 25 trend, spotting shots and follow-ups, etc.
What's the application? Yeah, there's a huge benefit from shooting 25s or 22s or 6mm in terms of less recoil with, lighter rifles. Well, no doubt, for sure. But are you shooting just targets? Yeah, all day long. I mean, that's why all your PRS guys are shooting 6.5s or 6s. In the NRL hunter, you've got power factor, so you can't go small because you lose power factor, right? So you got to say 6.5 or 7. There's some 25 cal stuff if you push them hot enough. In the newer 130s and stuff that you can still make power factor. So yeah, it's a laser beam, no recoil. But are we trying to knock down big animals at 600-700 yards? Probably not the best tool for the job, just because you can spot it. Because a lot of guys are kind of hitting that trend up. But here's the other thing, dude: 6mm bullets and 25 caliber bullets or 25 caliber bullets leave a very small impact, at 600-700 yards. So yeah, you may not have the recoil, but if that bullet goes into like foliage, you're not going to see it, regardless of how little the recoil is. Whereas a 30 cal, when it hits dirt or foliage, like you see stuff move, or 7mm, you see stuff move. You see it a lot better. So my advice is, if you're hunting, I would stay 6.5, 7mm or bigger and just get a really good break. Salmon River Solutions, 4-port, 5-port brake, dude, it's game changer brake. As much as I hate the term game changer, it really is the most effective tool for reducing recoil and still spotting your impact in a hunting application in my experiences. But yeah, they work. I've got 25s and 6s and I shoot them and they're awesome. They're fun to shoot and you can really, really watch and spot, but it's probably not the best tool for the job for like long range hunting, if that's what your game is. So it just depends on the application, if that answers the question.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think there's a lot of corollaries there to archery. Lighter arrows shoot flatter, but they also don't tend to have as great a penetration. But shooting some 600-700 grain thing that's going to dive off after 40 ain't the solution either. So I do think, and that I think one of the common frustrations people have is they're looking for like the one, pardon pun, magic bullet to do everything. And the answer is there is no magic bullet in anything. There's no magic tent. There's no magic boots. And the more you get one thing that does everything well, the less it's going to do a specific job particularly well, because it's kind of trying to do everything mediocre instead of one thing really well.
Yep.
I'm going to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it with an asterisk, because I think maybe what we should do, and maybe one of the topics we can dive into at the opener of the next one, is kind of like walking through in general principle how to work up a load, because I think this is probably a more in-depth topic than just a single question. But this guy's particular question is, what is the best way to check loads against one another?
Yeah. So is he asking like load? So it's just, that's confusing.
It's a little confusing to me, and we can leave it, and maybe we're better off just talking about loads in general on a later podcast. I know just from watching, like, my buddy Steve, who I always watch on Instagram, he shoots almost more than anybody else I know, and his stuff's real simple, man. Like, he makes like, I don't know how many of each one, and this will have this many grains, and this will have this many grains, and he just goes out and shoots them in under really reliable and predictable conditions, and he just measures everything and compares them and see which one of those is giving him the performance. If that's what he's asking, that's how I've seen people do it.
I mean, there's so many ways guys are doing load development, and I've tried them all. Like, I used to do like more of a bench rest shooter method, where you're tuning your load at your like most optimal distance, right? Not at 100 yards. I don't really care what it's doing at 100 yards, because I only need it to shoot like a 3-inch group at 100 yards. It doesn't matter. But a gun that shoots really, it's tuning, and it's a little bit different. And there's a lot more technical stuff that guys get into. It just depends on how far down the rabbit hole you want to go, right? Lately, I have resorted to more of a simple approach. I go to the charge that gets me the velocity I want. I'm not wasting powder and primers anymore, building up to pressure. Man, the books are really good at staying under pressure. And I'm not, giving advice to, go and throw a full hot charge in your rifle and go and shoot it. You got to work within your own abilities and skill sets and comfort zones. But for me, I find the velocity that I want with the, intended weight projectile, and I'll load, 10 at, and again, it goes back to projectile. Is it a projectile that's going to shoot 20 thou off the lands, or is it going to want a lot of jumps like a Barnes or a Nozzle Bond ABLR? Man, you guys will beat up on those bullets and say, oh, well, those bullets suck. I couldn't get them to tune. Well, you started with them touching the lands, and that was your first mistake. Those monolithics and ABLRs specifically, they like jump. So, you got to kind of be paying attention to what projectile you're shooting. So if it's a projectile that I need a lot of jump, I'll start 100 thou off the lands, and I'll start with a charge that gets me the velocity I want, and I shoot 10 of them, get a really nice sample size. I don't do the 3-shot stuff as much anymore, just because, sometimes it can bite you in the ass with having such a small sample size. And so I kind of go with a larger group of what I want. If it doesn't do what I want, then I go to the next, right? Where I think a lot of guys get themselves in trouble is they'll do, three of a half grain charge, building up to full load, from max pressure, and one bullet and one powder, and then they'll have another powder with another bullet, and they're just running it all through the same bore, and then they'll be like, oh, well, this combo didn't work well. Well, dude, you're introducing different copper into the barrel that's already got a copper bed laid down from, a nozzler, and now you're shooting a Barnes with a different powder, and it's got, it's a dirtier powder, and so you kind of got to keep them separate. I think do one combo, one bullet, one powder combo, clean your gun, break it, not break it in, but foul it back in, and then start your next. I think a lot of guys kind of find themselves getting hung up, and then they're just like, oh crap, this didn't shoot. And then when I went back to it, it did shoot. Well, what was different? Well, I cleaned the gun. Well, yeah, it's totally different. So if you're comparing loads, like to that guy's question, do your data, make sure your groups are, 5-10 shot, depending on what your application is, 3 to 5, 10, whatever. Larger is better. Record your data. Like I said, that's why the 10 is better. If you do 3 shot, you could have some stuff going on that you're missing. But 10 shots and they're all, under an inch in this nice tight little wad, you're probably there, because of that, there's probably 2 or 3 shot groups that are, half inch or whatever, guys think they need to have. And you've got a better sample size. You can say, yep, that's going to work. Okay, clean my rifle, go on to the next one if you really need to. I'm not a big chaser. If I find something that works on the first go, I'm good. I'm not going to go and try other stuff. Components are rare. I'm not going to go and spend all my time trying to chase H1000 or a Tumbo or a Reeler 26 and burn up all this powder or 215M primers chasing all this stuff. If I land on a load and it shoots 10 shots under an inch in my hunting rifle, I'm done. Like, I'm going on. I'm going to go to prove that load at, 700, my max hunting distance. That's what I wanted to shoot it at. And if it shoots adequately well there, I'm done. I'm not going to go and chase the stuff anymore. There's a time where I did just chase it and was just experimenting with different stuff. Man, those days are gone. I'm not burning powder and components chasing that stuff. There's so much stuff I want to test. I'm very structured and limited on what I'll test and how I test it, just because powder's so hard to get. I mean, yeah, it's coming back, but it's still not cheap. And it's, we're always just one war away from another shortage,
Yeah. I think that's really good advice, both on the technical and the more philosophical. And it was funny. I was listening to a podcast. Phelps was interviewing John Pinch the other day. And 2 of the things he said really stuck out to me. One, people's sample sizes are too small. And a lot of people are using too small jumps, like going up by half a grain at a time. And he's just like, this is silly. Like, you're not, you think you're seeing differences, you're not seeing differences. And he's like, you need to make those jumps bigger. And instead of shooting 3 bullets at all these micro jumps, go build 3 or 4 different options that are, further apart, and shoot bigger groups further apart. And that's going to give you cleaner data that you can actually do something on. So what he said, it lined up exactly. Like, with such small sample sizes, you don't know that you're not just looking at some kind of anomaly that's not actually being caused by your load specifically.
And a lot of that, guys will be like, well, when I do my part, my gun will shoot 1/4 inch. Well, it's because your gun's really shooting about an inch, 10 shot group. And it's a systematic, like it's an odds thing. Eventually those 3 bullets will all go through the same hole.
Right.
But the rest of the time, 75% of the time, when you're still doing your normal stuff, it's not shooting that. And guys are like, oh, it's me. Well, it may be you. What guys need to do is just go to the Hornady podcast. A lot of this stuff is, regurgitated information from those guys who know a lot more than me and Pinch and anybody else that in the industry. That's what those guys do for a living. They literally shoot 100-shot groups and test the probability of, where this bullet's going to land with more money than any of us could ever fathom and imagine. Whether you, and I get guys all the time, it's like, oh, I don't like Hornady. I don't like their bullets because whatever. It doesn't matter. The idea is the same. Whether you like their bullets or not, there's guys there. They're doing more testing than, I would argue, any other bullet manufacturer. Nosler, Barnes, Hammer, a Sierra. I don't care. Name them all. I doubt any of them are spending the money that Hornady is in developing this, the forward-off system. And I think they're also advanced because of that forward-off system. They had the money to invest in that. Now they have the technology to test bullets and to test this group size. So go onto their website and check out the Hornady. I'm not plugging the stuff on your stuff, but
no, please do.
It's amazing information to go on there. Seth does a really good job hosting that podcast, and the ballisticians there are just brilliant dudes. So again, whether you like Hornady bullets or not, just go listen to what they have to say about your group size. And I think the podcasts are really simple. Your group's not big enough, or your group's too small, or something like that. And then it's your group's still not big enough. Is a secondary podcast, and they're probably a year old or so, where they really dove into that sample size of shooting larger groups. And it's not shooting a 10-shot string. Be very cautious. If you're shooting a hot rod cartridge like a 28 Nosler, you do not want to go shoot a 10-shot string, because you're just smoking your barrel. It's a 3-shot group at one point on your target, and then let that barrel cool for a little bit. Another 3-shot or 4-shot group, to get that 10 shots, or 3, and then the 1, however you want to break it up.
Yeah.
But letting your barrel cool in between, so you're getting good data. You don't want to go do a 10-shot string, especially with a hot rod or any big Magnum cartridge with a light barrel. You're smoking your barrel, and you're probably going to get a changing result depending on your barrel manufacturing type. So it's your 3-shot groups. Let it cool, 3-shot, let it cool, 3-shot, let it cool. And you'll be surprised at the walk you see. And to John Pinch's point, yeah, you're doing 0.2 grain intervals for 4 grains. Yeah, all you're going to see is just this big, trend in velocity going up, and you're going to see some flat spots and whatever else everyone calls nodes. But really, do you really care about that? What that bullet does at 2,800 feet per second? No, you're not going to. You want it to be at 3,000, because if it's not at 3,000, you just shave 200 feet per second off your impact velocity, which is crucial. You got to look at the bullets you're shooting, and all right, this bullet needs 1,800 feet per second to expand reliably, right? That's 2,000 feet per second is a good all-around rule. Any bullet manufactured today for hunting purposes, if you kind of leave 2,000 feet per second as the minimum impact velocity, you've really got to be cranking it at 2,900, 3,000, depending on the bullet, and 30 cal, 7mm with weight, whatever else. But if you want to shoot 700 yards with an intended projectile, you better make sure you've got enough at this to starting out to get that impact velocity above 2,000, so you have reliable expansion. Yeah, you could push it down to 1,800 for some, 1,600 for others, but again, you really got to be cognizant of it depending on the bullet, because they're all different, and all the companies have different minimum velocities. So there's a lot more going into it. But in terms of the reloading part, building up that load, don't waste your time down low. Shoot some larger groups up in the higher muzzle velocities is where you want to be, and then choose your powder accordingly. And again, all that stuff you can find on, like I said, that Hornady podcast. They talk a lot about that stuff. So it's a great source of information for guys that have those questions, because that's straight from the horse's mouth, man. A lot of us are just regurgitating their stuff, because I go to those guys, I'm like, hey, Seth, I need this. Oh, yeah, man, do this and shoot this group. And, man, this works. And it's simplified my life a lot. For as much as I shoot and as much as I'm testing for different bullets, saved me a ton in just time, powder, primers, and projectiles. It's, it simplifies things a lot more. So I tell a lot of people, that's what I tell everyone, follow what those guys are doing, because they shoot more in a week than most guys will shoot in a year. Just testing stuff.
Yeah, that's good to know. So we just went and said there is no magic bullet. And then I got this question as a follow-up. I really want to hear your thoughts on the 7 PRC. It seems like a do-it-all cartridge.
It is. When we were talking about, the 6mm and 25s and, trying to find that golden bullet, the 7mm is kind of like that sweet spot. It's not a 6 and a 6.5 in the form of, sectional density and frontal diameter. It's a good all around hunting cartridge, or, hunting bullet design, just because you have like really, really good BCs in the weight classes that most people want to shoot. Right. You got to go pretty big in a 30 cal to match a BC of a 7mm. So you're just increasing recoil dramatically in a 300 PRC or a 300 Norma improved, which are beasts. I love them. I'm a 30 cal guy. I love them. You hit stuff with it, you hit it, and you put stuff down because of that frontal diameter and the energy that transfer from those 30 cals, from the big 30 cals. With 7 PRC, man, it's hard to argue with when you look at the ballistics of it. I'm a 300 Win Mag fan, 180 grain AccuBond or 300 Win Mag. I've seen that cartridge combination put more animals in the dirt than anything else that in my personal experience from guiding and hunting. It just works. It's a phenomenal system. But for long range guys, when you look at a 7 PRC with 180 grain ELDM or 175 ELDX, or now Nosler released their 175 ABLR, and they're now producing 7 PRC ammo with their now Nosler stamped brass, which would be really nice ammunition for the factory guys, because it's a bonded bullet. It's the only true bonded bullet that I've seen on the market for 7 PRC for the factory stuff is that EBLR. And that bullet, the 175 ABLR, is a great long range performer in that, 4, 5, 6, 700 and beyond. If your skill set's there, it's a great bullet for that application. it's hard to beat. Those bullet weights in the 7mm with their BCs at that 3000. It beats a 300 Win Mag downrange, on paper, in terms of wind drift and all those other things. And it's got a little bit less recoil. I'm still kind of like 180 grain bullet going 3,000 feet per second. 100. I mean, you've got the input, the output. It's going to have recoil. So it's a little bit less, maybe just because of bore diameter, but guys say, "Oh, I'm gonna go 7 PRC because it's got a lot less recoil." I wouldn't say it has a lot less recoil,
right?
But in a properly designed rifle stock and rifle system with the right brake or suppressor, I would say the 7 PRC is a little bit more controllable on the scale of things. But the average guy I don't think is going to notice a huge difference in terms of felt recoil. The rifle's still gonna move on you. You're gonna feel it. But as far as a do-all, be-all, whether you hand load or you shoot factory, 7 PRC is hard to beat. It's like you got a hot rod of 7 SAUM to touch it, right? So you got to have a long action or a medium action 7 SAUM with a custom reamer, right? You're already in a separate niche. You're in another world, and you're hand loading all your ammunition. You're pushing it really hard. You're hard on brass. It's just hard. And I've got 7 SAUM, and it shoots great, and it does what the 7 PRC does, but it's way on the upper end of pressure. Whereas 7 PRC case design is way down on pressure, so it's easier on brass. It's safer, for those guys worried about that. But you can get factory ammo for it. That's kick ass, man. Like, not everybody reloads, and believe it or not, like, I get tired of reloading. I mean, if I could show my bench right now, there's 7, like 50 round. I don't even know if it'll show it. You can see all the brass.
Yeah.
It just takes a while for me to get back into the mode of, all right, I got to go prep all this brass and 6.5 and 280 Ackley and 300 Norma and 300 Win Mag and 7 PRC. And dude, it's nauseating, man. I got a family and I got other stuff I got to do. So it's a lot. So having the really good factory options in the 7 PRC is where I think it really shines over the 7 Rem Mag, which is still a great cartridge, but it has its limitations and has its issues with, the case design and whatever else that guys will argue. It is what it is. 7 Rem Mag is a great gun. If you've got one, I wouldn't just sell it and get rid of it or rebarrel it just to make a 7 PRC. But if you're in the market and you're deciding between all these things, 7 PRC all day long.
It's funny,
especially over a 28 nozzle. I would take a 7 PRC. I know guys are like, "Well, 28 nozzle is way faster." Yeah, but it has half the barrel life.
Right.
So if you're talking longevity wise, if you don't care about barrels and you have dispendable income, go ahead and shoot 28 nozzler, suck up a ton of recoil and just burn barrels out and spend way more on ammo. It's not cheap ammo. Whereas a 7 PRC is going to do everything you really need it to do for 90% of hunting applications for a lot less, and your barrel's going to last twice as long.
It's funny you mentioned that about loading, because I was on a podcast the other day and we were actually on somebody else's podcast and we were talking about goal setting. And I said something that seemed a little bit controversial, but it isn't if I unpack it. And I said, a lot of you guys are wasting your time hand loading. And one of the things we were talking about on the podcast is trying to find out the thing that is holding you back the most, or the most important thing you need to change in order to start having success hunting if you're not currently having success hunting. And I would argue the same thing for dudes who are building their own arrows. Now, if increasing your group accuracy by half an inch at 400 yards is the thing that's keeping you from killing animals, then I think you should probably spend a lot of time hand loading and perfecting that. I don't think for the majority of people who listen to this podcast, that's the problem. I think it's probably more of a problem that they're only able to get 7 days off a year for an elk hunt, and that doesn't even give them time to find an animal. Or they're not doing any decent training during the spring, so they get up to the mountain for their first hunt and they're sucking hind tit the whole time. Or there's a million other things that you could be spending that time on. Now, if you like doing it, and you like the art and the science, and you find it rewarding, and you like diving into those numbers, or you are a guy who is already a very accomplished hunter, you can find a lot of animals, and you're taking pokes at 6, 7 plus, 100% you should be doing that. But if it's not one of the most important things, it's like the quality of factory ammo today compared to what it was 10 years ago, like, I just don't think it's the thing that's stopping guys from killing shit.
No. And when it comes to like finances and time, like it's a freaking money hole. It's a dark, deep rabbit hole that once you start down, it's really hard to get out of. And if you're starting into it and you go onto forums, you can get misled and waste thousands of dollars chasing stuff that is irrelevant. It does not matter. It doesn't apply to you. If you're only shooting white-tailed deer and antelope, maybe a mule deer or a black bear, and you're not shooting, past 500-600 yards, it's all irrelevant. It doesn't matter because there's factory ammunition and factory rifles that will do 99% of it with like not just questionable, shot probability, more than enough. I mean, a 1-inch rifle with factory ammunition will do everything you need to do within, 500 yards all day long, 600 yards probably. And most rifles today, the guys are shooting with those combinations are probably realistically sub-inch, 3/4 of an inch. It's more than enough, but I'm the same as everybody else. Like, I love shooting stuff with my hand rolls. It's fun, man. It's fun shooting stuff. It's rewarding. And testing and playing with it. But if I added up the money, which I will never do because I don't want to know how much money I've spent, and and I get some products from companies, right? There's, been in this long enough. I've got relationships, and I get free bullets here and there and some brass here and there, and those companies are great to work with. But the stuff I've spent, like the powder, I don't get free powder. I buy it just like everybody else. And especially nowadays, they don't give anybody anything unless you're a sponsored shooter. Dude, it's expensive. Buying 8-pounders just to roll through $350 worth of powder. You add that up over, 10 years, I could have gone on some really cool hunts. And I'm getting to that point now where I'm like, man, I look back. I wish I would have done things a little differently. Yeah. But it is fun experimenting. Like, I shoot a lot of hammer bullets. You can't find those in factory loaded ammo. Right. So there is that side of, which is what I'm doing more now. When I'm reloading, I'm only reloading bullets that I can't find in loads that availability. But 7PRC, like, I'm going to be shooting Nosler's ABLR load. I'm going to be shooting some different 6.5 stuff this year, just stuff that's available because it shoots really, really well. And if it shoots well and the bullets perform well on game within the intended application, all day long, buy a case of it, just go shoot, because shooting is more important than the accuracy of your load. Tinkering your load. I get guys all the time that just get lost in space. They'll have 3 different rifles they're trying to do load development on, and they're just dumping stupid amounts of money and time chasing this stuff. And I'm like, you should just sell all your stuff, get a 7PRC, a custom, really nice 7PRC, and shoot this bullet, this ammo, and you just need to go to the range and just shoot. They're like, oh, you're right. And they sell all their freaking rifles. They get one, and it shoots really good with this load from Unknown Munitions or, from Factory Hornady or whatever. And they just go and shoot. And just like that, they're a more confident, better shooter. And when you have that confidence and it goes into the field, you're just that much more successful. And instead of wasting all their off season, like you said, chasing bullets and chasing this stuff when they're not working out, they're not staying in shape, they're not, scouting, all those other things that are more, I think should be a more focus on for success in the field, as opposed to, like I said, chasing, a 3-inch group at 400 yards because my gun shot 4 inches and that's just not quite adequate. Just like, really, like, there's other things.
No, 100%. So one last question on the 7PRC, because I'm considering I have a 300 PRC. It's longer. It's a bigger gun than I wanted. I now know, and I'm considering going down to a 7PRC. Talk to me a little bit about barrel length options and kind of sacrifices. Like, it is my logic that I can get away with a shorter barrel on a 7PRC even sound?
So yeah, I get that a lot. I get this question daily or weekly, at least several times a week. Hey, 7PRC 20 or 22 or 24. It's like, dude, I don't even run 24-inch barrels anymore, hardly ever, unless somebody sends me a rifle to review and it's got 24-inch barrel on it. But if I'm building one, it's 20 or 22, and it's based on, performance of that cartridge, right? Like, I'm not going to build an 18 or 20-inch 300 Norma improved. Guys do it, but you're leaving a lot on the table, in terms of powdered burn and velocity. So what's the application? What bullet am I shooting, right? What bullet do I really want to shoot? Do I want to shoot a bunch of bullets? I'm probably going to go 22 inches just because I'll have enough velocity to get whatever projectile I want, to have that minimum impact velocity at the distance that I want. And for me, it's 700 yards, right? That's where I gauge everything. So I'm like, all right, the 7 PRC I'm building right now with unknown munitions, I'm going to shoot the 170 grain tipped hammer hunters, what I'm, starting to develop that rifle with. So I know I need to get X amount of velocity at the muzzle in order to have it be effective 700 yard gun, right? So that muzzle velocity that I need is within, a realistic term, like, say 20 inch 7 PRC, like, I need to get at least 2,800 feet per second out of projectile. That's doable, right? So yes, 700 or 7 PRC with a 20 inch barrel with that projectile is still going to get me what I need at this distance. Then I'm good to go. Again, I'm hand loading. What guys get in trouble with the short barrels is if you don't hand load and you're limited to factory ammunition and you start chopping that barrel down to 20, again, I'm tuning my load with those bullets, or, Unknown is actually doing load development on there for me for the review. They're tuning that load to get max muzzle velocity, right? But when you shoot factory, that is no longer on the table. You're just basically going to take, 100 feet per second or more off of the factory box. Well, if that's already low, and then you take 100 or 125 off that, now you're barely on that cusp, right? Of at this distance, am I going to have enough to reliably expand this bullet? So that's what I tell guys. If you're hand loading, stay 22, if you have to. I know it sucks if you're putting a can on the end, but in Canada,
not an issue up here, my friend.
Canada, I'm like,
welcome to
you might as well.
Russia.
If I'm in Canada, dude, I'm just going to run 22 or 24 and be good with it. But down here, I'm suppressed on everything. So that's where I'm trending a lot more 20s and 22s because I can still get the muzzle velocity I want, and I can still do it with factory rifle or factory ammo. But if that is on the table as a thing, I usually tell guys 22 inches is a good spot to go because you're going to have a good muzzle velocity all the way around, and it's not unwieldy. You guys are like, it's too long. 22 inches is really not that bad. Even if you put a 2-inch break on there, you're still 24 inches, which would be like a 24-inch barrel with nothing on it. So I think you're still in a good balance. The rifle's balanced well. It's still maneuverable in the woods. You start going below 20 and you're going to start chopping off a lot of muzzle velocity, especially if you don't hand load. That's going to be really hard to recover. That gun's now like a 500-yard rifle. And if that's all you're doing, sweet, like good to go, right? But guys are always wanting to push it. That's 700 yards, 800 yards seems to be for a lot of guys where the realistic, I want to have the ability to shoot that far and have, good ethical, bullet expansion. They're not worried about the 1,000-yard stuff as much as guys think. I mean, there's the guys that trend that and chase that, whatever. But overall, it seems about 700 yards seems to be the average for a lot of guys wanting that performance at 700 yards. And so that's where I would trend it off of. Just 7 PRC with a 22-inch barrel, man, it's a hard combo to beat. If you're running suppressed and you hand load, 20 inches will get it done. And there's some other loads I'm sure that'll come out as a 7 PRC. It's not going where I hear guys say, "Oh, well, is it going to be here?" Dude, that cartridge.
I think that's the problem
anywhere.
that just recently got solved. If we go back a year or two, the problem was much like what the 7 SOM had, is that there was zero factory ammo available. And I think now that there is a couple of legitimate options on the table, if you're only going to own one gun. And that was the whole reason I bought my 300 PRC at the time, was because it was like the 7 PRC, but there was ammo available for it. And there was a couple other nice factory guns available already chambered in that round. But I think the availability of good factory ammo is definitely going to impact the popularity of that gun.
I mean, for the 7 PRC, you've got the Hornady 180 grain ELDM load, which is for the match stuff for the guys wanting a thin jacket, like a burger type thin jacket, expansive bullet at distance, the 180 ELDM. Even though Hornady says don't hunt with it, it's not a hunting bullet. A lot of guys are doing it, and it does work great for those distances beyond 400 yards. Inside that, it's going to expand rapidly, violently. Right. And so depending if you shoot an elk in the shoulder or something like that, you're not going to have very good results. So that's where the ELDX from Hornady is more of that bonded, but it's not really a bonded. It's kind of crimped in the back to hold them together. It's a better hunting bullet for that all around kind of stuff, not 100 to 600 yard range, 700 yard range, or even further, depending on again the caliber and the muzzle velocity. you've got that kind of realm going on. And then you've got the 160 grain CX, which is their monolithic from Hornady. I love that bullet. It's a great penetrating bullet. Yeah, it's not going to expand like a, ELDM at, 800 yards, but it's going to drive deep and perform really well from 50 yards to, 600 yards in a 7 PRC. It's going to be a solid performer. And now you've got the 175 ABLR from Nosler. Man, those are some great choices to shoot from if you're going to get in the 7 PRC, get a couple boxes each and see which one your rifle likes the most, and then kind of pair your hunting based on, if you're not shooting 500 yards or in, you don't really want an ELDM. You'd be better off with the ELDX or an ABLR or the CX. Or if you're restricted to copper, CX is a great bullet. Shoots really well in my experiences, and it performs really well on game.
I shoot the ELDX out of my the factory ELDX out of my 300 PRC, and I've actually shot a few things pretty close. And I know a lot of people have had issues, but I also think when you start getting to those bigger calibers, it stops being such an issue. I think maybe if you're dealing with like 6.5s and downs, I mean, I get it. There's not a whole lot of kinetic energy, but like, I don't really care what the bullet does when it's like a 30 cal. And it, like, I'm thinking of two black bears in particular that were like sub 200, and it just annihilated them. Like, they literally dropped in their tracks, stone dead. And I think that has to do with the size of the caliber of the bullet. And I think the fact that the 7 PRC is on the bigger end of the spectrum, I think you could also feel safe with that ELDX as being a good all-around choice, and not necessary, because I do know that was people's knock on it for a while, is that at closer distances it didn't perform the way it was supposed to, and people got a lot of penciling.
Oh, well, a lot of penciling, or some penciling, but a lot of over expansion was my grief with the 143. And, I talked about it long ago, and I've always been kind of like not on that train for that bullet. I do not like it. Still to this day, don't like it. I've had black bears sub 200 yards where the bullet just exploded.
Yep.
And then it turned into a nightmare chasing. I hunt in grizzly country, just like you.
Yep.
You don't blood trail stuff, man, unless you have a death wish. In the country I shoot black bears in, there's grizzlies everywhere. Yep. So I need it to go down right now. And I shot a bear with a 6.5 Creedmoor with a 143 LDX at 140 yards and dropped him. He took off running.
Yep.
Bullet just grenaded. Only got one lung. Turned into a rodeo. My partner ended up shooting the bear with a 10 millimeter after I dumped another round into it, and we jumped it in the brush. And he shot it like 10 feet as it came out the brush pile on his side in the neck and dumped it. And then a lot of other experiences with the 143 that were less than ideal for performance. And then as soon as I shot the 200 grain ELDX and 300 Win Mag and had phenomenal performance. Excellent.
Yep.
175 ELDX, again, I've had some stuff that was kind of weird, but at the end of the day, I couldn't say it was a failure or anything. The animals died. Just some different stuff that I'm used to in terms of what bullets do, but bullets do weird stuff when they hit, mediums. But in terms of, like what you're saying, the 175 ELDX and then the bigger stuff, I don't really have any issues with it. It's the 143 that I'm not a fan of.
Okay, a little bit of a tangent here while we're on the topic of black bears and spring is coming up. And you're in thick country and grizzly country like I am. Where do you aim on a black bear with a rifle?
I go straight up the foreleg and just kind of split it, because again, I'm going for a shoulder. I want them down right there.
That's what I was looking. That's what I was looking to hear. And so many people talk about the vitals being center. And when I'm archery hunting, I am center all day long. Because I know that like bears are not a hardy animal. Like I'm going to get a pass through like butter on a bear with a fixed blade broadhead. But in my experience, and I probably got more experience killing black bears than anything else, and watching other people kill or not kill black bears, big bullet dumped in that front shoulder every day, because the priority is to put them down. Because the other thing is they're so hard to find in there. Like as soon as they get in any kind of veg, like a big black bear can actually get quite small, quite fast. By the time it like rolls up, or if it falls in like a little tree well or something like that, and like they disappear fast, man. So that's that was encouraging for me to hear, because I agree 100%. On bears, I'm going, and that's my other argument for a bigger caliber. Like when we're talking about guys trying to get away with those smaller bullets, I'm shooting a 212 grain 30 caliber bullet. Like when I smash a bear in the shoulder, the bear is going down. Like there's no conversation to be had.
Yeah, there's no discussion. It's right now.
Yep.
And you hit him behind the shoulder with that Yeah, they may go a little ways, but they usually die on their feet, and it's very short. In my
Yeah.
experiences of seeing them dumped. I mean, I had a buddy a couple years ago shoot a black bear, and again, lower 48, probably same up there. Guys are like, oh, I shot this huge bear, and then they walk up to it, and there's always shrinkage, right? Bears are always way
Especially
smaller.
with bears, dude. It's happened to me myself. I'm like, I'm almost looking at this bear like, oh shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, whoops.
But when they're always kind of tend to be smaller than you think, everyone's like, oh, it's 400 pounds. And it's like, maybe 200. Yeah. But, dude, they're really hard to find. Like the average
Super
bear in Montana is probably like a sub 6 foot, like 5.5 foot, 5.5 foot, 150 legit, like realistically 150 to 180 pound bear, maybe in the spring specifically because there's no fat on them.
Yep.
Dude, 150 pound bears like a big dog. If you don't watch that
like
animal go down in alders or in logs, like I said, my hunt partner shot one. He smoked it at like 250 yards with a 156 burger. Just smoked it. I watched over the shoulder through 15s, and I'm like, oh yeah, dead bear. He took off like a banshee. And again, it was a small bear. It was funny because I passed the bear. I was like, dude, I'm not shooting that thing. It's little. And he's like, oh, I don't care. I want to shoot it. I got a new rifle. And so, that's what led to that bear's demise. But we watched the bear run into a thicket, and like I said, 250 yards right up above us. And so he shoots it. We watch it. It goes silent. We know the bear's dead, on the hillside in front of us. But we walk up this steep hill and go to the blood trail, and we're walking. He walked right over that bear. Yeah. It went down in between two logs, died on its back with its legs tucked. Yep. And he literally, like, if it was alive, it would have mauled the shit out of him. It was dead, but it just goes to the point that they just disappear quick. And so guys coming out to hunt bears out, west, or, whether you hunt bears a lot, wherever you're at, but if you come to hunt bears in Idaho, Montana, or Wyoming in the spring, and you got to deal with grizzlies, go big on your rifle, because it's a different element than, hunting in Arizona or New Mexico where there's not grizzlies, and it's more open country where it's a lot harder for a bear to hide in Arizona, glassing in this juniper country, the cedar country where we used to hunt bears and I lived down there, versus hunting them up in the dark timber here. I want that bear to go down. I want it to go down right now, just because, one, it's easier to find. Bears don't bleed when they clog up that hole of fat. They do not bleed at all. And I don't want to deal with grizzlies. I've had rodeos with them, and it's amazing how fast they will come in on, that stuff. And I just don't want to deal with them anymore. So put them down fast.
That's the exact same thing with the country where I hunt. There's tons of grizzlies. Like I see, so there's days where I'm sitting in, I kind of hunt this like borderland, like ag land, and it's easy to get permissions because people hate all the black bears. But like there's evenings, I'll see more grizzlies than I will. And it's cool because they'll come out in the I'm watching grizzlies at like 150 yards. Yeah. And because it's a springtime and there's decent feed around and stuff, they don't really care too much. It's like a cool experience, but like once you put something down, it's like, okay, we got to kick things into hyperdrive here, because it's not too long until that scent kind of starts wafting around.
That's the same thing up here. It's just, you'll see more grizzlies than black bears. It's like, sometimes it's like 4-1 grizzlies to black bears. You'll spend a whole day out and all you saw was grizz.
Yep. Let's wrap it up there, man. That was fantastic. We didn't even put a dent in these, so we got lots.
I was going to say, you got a lot of questions, I bet, more so than what did we get? There's 4 or 5.
Yeah, and I probably got 80 here. Like, it was ridiculous. And
is there one more question that's just like not going to be one specific? If it's going to be like, man, 100 people, 200 people will benefit from this one. Let's squeeze one more good one, if you think there's one that you can see easily.
I think the principle of this one is important. Are all the carbon barrel lightweight mountain hunting rifles worth the cost? And he mentions like Proof, Snowy, Gunworks, that type of thing, because I do think we're talking about a lot of guys who have middle of the road budgets, and I don't think there's any debate that if you got all the money on the planet, there's some premium products. Yeah. But what type of performance increase are we really looking at here for the type of financial investment?
That's a great question. That's what I was looking for. That's a good one to end on, because I get that a lot, right? The carbon barrel stuff. So there's no secret. Like, I love Proof Research. They happen to be in my hometown, but they just make a great barrel. It's a phenomenal barrel. One of the ones that's been the most consistent for me across the board. I don't get bad proof barrels. Whereas like when I shot other barrels before I kind of started shooting proofs, I got one would shoot really well and one just would not shoot. It was just weird. Just big inconsistencies, right? Whereas with the proofs, I haven't seen that. It doesn't matter, 22 cal or 338. Like they just shoot. I don't have issues with them. I haven't had one issue yet. And that's a lot of barrels. I used to keep track, and I don't even know now. I'm like 80, 90 barrels now, and just maybe even more now. It's a lot. And I know there's guys who build guns on a higher volume than that. They'll build 100, 200 guns a year, and whatever else. But they also have a customer that's kind of the one extra thing that they have to factor into is this, well, was it the rifle or was it not, right? But in terms of barrels on factory rifles, there's a lot. That's another thing we're talking about new at SHOT Show. There's a lot of companies with carbon fiber barrels. And when I'm asking about, well, who makes it? They're like, oh, well, we make it. Yeah. Huge concern for me because the odds of a company coming out with a carbon fiber barrel, their first gen, and it being a performer, if they really are making it themselves, I would be super skeptical. I mean, and the price point's going to be lower. That's why everyone's bringing them in-house and trying to wrap them themselves. It's just a very low percentage of the probability of that rifle being a really good all-around shooter. And the carbon fiber wrapping technology, and while it's simple on paper, it's just well, you're just wrapping it in carbon, but there's resins and all kinds of different proprietary like systems in place that make a good barrel or great barrel, right? And I don't want to name names and just like start bashing on barrels, but there's some out there on more factory available rifles that I've seen have a very high rate of lemons. One or two guys will get this brand of rifle and it'll shoot really good. And then, like I said, I get 5 or 6 emails from guys saying, hey, I got this gun and it just is not shooting for me. What am I missing? It's like, dude, I get tons of those. Like Christensen Arms is not a surprise, right? You hear that name come up a lot. Super high failure rate. I don't recommend them. I don't care what, guys say about price point. There's way better options. And if that's your price point, I'd rather shoot a steel barrel than a Christensen carbon fiber, just because I have yet to see one shoot consistently, reliably. And again, one rifle is not a good benchmark. Well,
it goes back to our sample size earlier.
It's
like if we take 10 of these, what's the performance we're going to get across all 10?
Right. And in my experience, like of 10, it's 50-50. So if you want to gamble, $3,000 or 2,500 or whatever a Christensen is, and you want a 50-50 gamble on it, like cool, whatever, waste your money. There's better options out there. Fierce has got some carbon fiber barrels out. Browning released a rifle this year with a preferred carbon fiber barrel on it, preferred rifle. I think preferred barrels or whatever. Again, it's just, there's a lot of different companies coming out with marketable barrels for the factory option. So, they can't.
I like when they do the collabs because it gives me confidence. Like I was looking at getting a folding stock, and one of the reasons the Bergara appealed to me was because they'd linked up with XLR. And it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about your chassis. Like that's a known chassis. It's a good chassis. And I think it's the same way when we see some of these hybrid factory using the more well-known, like a proof barrel or a benchmark barrel or a barrel that has more history behind it. I think they might lose a little bit in the margins, but I think it gives the end consumer a lot more confidence because you've got a known variable.
Yep. And like, I think it's Bergara. They've got their carbon fiber barrel and it's kind of new technology, totally different. We talked to those guys about their wrapping process and I know they had some hangups early on because they were going to release it and then they had some issues and they kind of stopped and I'm sure they went back and cleaned some stuff up and now they're releasing it again. So again, like not to bag on Bergara, they make a great steel barrel. So if I'm going to gamble on getting something, it's just like, well, I know their steel barrels shoot really, really well, so I don't know if you're really talking about that mid-range price point, like I said, if it's not a collab with like Proof Research or Benchmark and again, the Browning with the preferred, I shot a preferred, it shot okay, but again, small sample size. I can't say. Talking to the engineers of Browning, they were super impressed with the quality of those barrels. So, it is what it is. If you're talking about just a little bit more for a carbon fiber barrel, I don't think it's worth it because I would be really questioning like what performance you're getting, because it's not as much just like wrapping the carbon on there. Like a Bartline barrel, Bartline makes a great barrel, they always have, but their carbon is really, really thin. So you're paying a lot more just for like a veneer. Essentially, it's just like, wow, it looks cool, but it's heavy as hell still. So what did it really achieve? Well, the guys say, well, they shoot great. Well, yeah, but if you take a number 4 Bartline with no carbon on it, guess what? It shoots really, really good. And for half the price, because it doesn't have carbon wrapped on it.
Right.
So the stiffness and all those things that come into it, well, there has to be a science to it. It can't just be something wrapped on. Like proof, when you see their, I've toured their facility and seen how they do their system, right? And for me, they set the benchmark, right? They're like the Swarovski of the barrels, because they were the first ones to really build the technology, perfect it. And I shot their barrels before and they shot like crap. And I was painfully, brutally upfront with them. So, I mean, these barrels shoot like shit. And, but here I am still in good terms with the company, because, hey, they have to have that feedback of honesty from the end user that these aren't shooting well, this isn't it. And you also have to have a company that's driven to produce an excellent product. And that's what I really respect about them, is they really are pushing and creating, and as giant as their orders are, they're still producing a great product, and their QC has not lapsed. They have a very stringent QC process, and I really respect that, because I know that the end product for the user is going to be the best. Whereas a lot of the companies that are just spitting these things out, trying to make it a marketable $1,500 rifle with a carbon fiber barrel, there's no way the QC is as good, and there's no way the product is going to be comparable. So in terms of, is it worth it? If it's not a reputable, large match grade barrel manufacturer, like I said, Proof Research, Bartline, or Benchmark, like you said, or Carbon 6 is another one that's real popular. I don't think it's worth the squeeze if it's not one of those bigger barrels. Personally, you can play with it, but just know that in a lot of experiences, a lot of those companies are not having very good results across the board.
I think that's a great way to end it. And I think it's also like that's what we're shooting for here on this podcast for everybody listening, is kind of cut through the noise, provide really technical feedback, but also do it in a way where you don't have to be the dyed-in-the-wool gun nerd to take value, because I'm not. And that's the reason why I asked you to come on and do this with me, because I think it's a good, some of the gun podcasts, it was like when I first started shooting archery, trying to listen to John Dudley. I was like, I don't have a clue what this dude is talking about, man. I'm like, I want to learn, but like was so many levels past where I was. So I think that's if I can sum it up in a couple sentences, like cutting through the bullshit and getting you guys usable, practical information that, again, is not sponsored. Everybody has relationships, and that's fine. And it's good to know and work with the people at the companies, but no one here is financially incentivized in any way from any brands. So we'll do what we can to kind of keep that value coming. Now, on that note, I know we were mentioning all your Instagram troubles, and I'll put all your links in the show notes below, but how can people stay in touch? And is there anything coming down the pipe, like articles, reviews that people can look forward to coming up soon?
So yeah, I mean, it's still, as far as Instagram goes, the Pap Winkle's page is still, the page I have running. My secondary page is the Fly Rifleman, is mostly my fly fishing stuff for my guiding and whatnot, but it's also, that'll be my backup, because once they pull the plug, once it's gone, it's gone. And honestly, at this point, if they pull the plug on it, I'm not even going to try to build it back up, because I just don't see it being something I could put the energy into and the time that they'll just keep doing what they're doing. Like they don't like people talking about guns and giving out information that have a really good connection with the audience. And when I do those Q&As, it blows it up, man. Like I can't even get to all of them. It's so popular. So that's why I was really excited to come on here and start doing this with you, is just because this is going to be the next way for us, because I think podcasts are a better way. Like I said, once this information's out there, you can go back and find your podcast and listen to them, and you can share it. Whereas like once I do those Q&As and I fight through Instagram with it, then they're gone, forever. Those answers, after 24 hours, they're gone. So I think the podcast is the better way to do it. And some stuff I want to do later on, hopefully with you, and we can interview some more gun companies and get a larger Zoom kind of thing going with some other companies and do bigger stuff and get more information out there that's, like you said, unbiased and just cutting through the noise and the bullshit to get the answers to everybody. So Instagram is a great place. Pap Winkle and the Fly Rifleman is my secondary page. And then also Western Hunter Magazine's where I write most of my articles now. I do some freelance stuff for precision rifle and some other stuff that, it's kind of hit or miss. So you just kind of have to pay attention there. But working on some more stuff for 2024, like we've talked about, just a different platform to create more gun stuff that's accessible, that's not controlled by anybody else but me. So that's kind of the plan in the works, but I don't know when I'll get to that fully to release it. It's in the works.
Awesome. Well, that was great. We got lots of questions for next time, so I'm not going to bother throwing up another Q&A, but for everybody listening, if you got any feedback for me or Pap, you can hit us both up on Instagram. Let us know what you liked. Let us know what you'd like to see more of, and we'll make sure to get it together. And other than that, thanks a lot for the time, man. Looking forward to doing it again. Thanks
for having me, man. I love it. It's a great hanging out with you, talking with you, and helping people out. That's what it's all about.
All right, brother. Have a good day, man.
You too, man.
Cheers.